Creative Control is brought to you by FreshBooks, a ridiculously easy-to-use cloud accounting software for small business owners that saves you time and gets you paid faster. FreshBooks is now used by over 10 million people worldwide, and I want you to try it too. For your free 30-day trial, go to freshbooks.com/creative control and enter Creative Control. That's creative with a K, control with a K. In their How Did You Hear About Us section. Stay organized and get paid faster with FreshBooks. Are you hungry but don't know what to cook? HelloFresh Canada is here to help. Have a whole delicious meal's worth of wholesome ingredients, plus a simple-to-follow recipe, all delivered right to your Canadian home. There are vegetarian options and plans for single people and families, too. I've tried this. It was great. Visit HelloFresh.ca for more information and menu options, and use the promo code CREATIVE50, that's creative with a K, 50, for 50% off your first order. Protomartyr is a sophisticated and endlessly fascinating rock and roll band from Detroit, Michigan, and Domino Records has just released their fourth album, a compelling, daunting, and multi-layered record called Relatives in Descent. Protomartyr lead singer and lyricist Joe Casey first appeared on this show in 2016, and he and I connected again for a discussion about every song on Relatives in Descent, and we ended up talking about the state of the world a lot, too. Sponsored by FreshBooks, HelloFresh Canada, Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, Planet Bean Coffee, and Granddad's Donuts, this is Joe Casey of Protomartyr on the 357th episode of Creative Control with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Pass through, pass my pain, take everything, reach rock, roll, pass through silent, put shiny base oils, fresh in a pot, for sales from an old goat in the gut. Here's a thing, here's a thing, and I will be with you for the rest of your life. Hi, Joe, how's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty good.
Good. Nice to have you back on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
The last time we spoke, we spent like 100 hours talking about the state of Michigan. How are things in Michigan?
Oh, I think it's probably exactly the same as it was before. I don't think anything has really changed. Same old shit, really.
Yeah. Good. Any improvements? Any marked improvements since the last time we spoke in 2016?
Now I'm trying to think of what they've done. That's been.
I think at the time we were delving into the water crisis. We were delving into kind of state corruption type things. Yeah, we got very political last time.
Since then, I think the water people are still using filters in Flint. The state prosecutor has prosecuted some people, but it's almost like show trials. I think he's planning on running for governor or something. So it's been very kind of spotty in that regard.
Right. What about you?
Want to sweep that under the rug?
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah, and you're still there, right?
We have a new hockey stadium that costs a lot of money, and Kid Rock might be running for Senate. So things are going swell here.
Yeah, it feels like things are not better, but things might be worse.
Yeah. Well, I think things can kind of plug along here, but the national news got pretty dire in the last year or so. So that's kind of overshadowed anything, I think. Yeah.
Well, I thought we would spend our time today talking about this new record, Relatives in Descent, and I imagine that some of the things that are going on in the world might be reflected in some of our conversation about these songs. Mm-hmm. I think. I don't know this, I think. So okay. I want to ask you some questions about each and every song on the record, but I want to begin with the album art because it strikes me that there are now a number of Protomartyr records that feature a face, a particular face. Can you talk about the image on the cover of this record?
Yeah, I mean, I like keeping the album art pretty simple, something that you can maybe read into or not. And for this one, I really wanted like a woman's face on the cover, and I wanted it to didn't know exactly what woman or, for what reason. And I found that picture of Maud Feely, who is a old silent movie actress. And at the time, like, that's from a postcard. At the time, she was considered one of the great beauties of America. And so she would have, you could just buy postcards of her different acting roles. And the full picture, it's pretty obvious that she's a nun. I just like the way she looked. There was another interviewer that was like, "Oh, did you pick it because it looks like the Sphinx?" And I thought for a second, and I was like, "No, but yes, I did." that's exactly what I was trying to do, because it was kind of like my thinking was a very inscrutable. You can't tell if she's staring out at you at anger, or it's a very interesting look she has in that photo.
Right.
So I like, so when the interviewer said the Sphinx, I was like, that's exactly what I was trying to do.
Do you think subconsciously that was what you were trying to do?
No, but it's a nice happy accident. And, that reasoning for it makes a lot more sense than my, like, I wanted a woman's face and I want it to be, kind of ageless and there it is.
Yeah.
So it was a dumber process than that. So.
You did make the point that you were because I mentioned that some of the album covers have had faces on them, and when I think back on them, I think they're mostly male. You made a point that you wanted it to be a female face, and when you said that, it made me think of a song we're going to talk about in a while called "Male Plague." But is there a particular reason why you were hoping a female face would adorn the cover?
Well, at that time, I had the line "She's trying to reach you." I didn't know exactly what it was going to be when I started thinking about the artwork. So the idea of a she being in the song somewhere, and not like your typical rock and roll she, where it's like a love interest or something. I just kind of felt like that had to, it was time, to mix it up a little bit.
And this line that you reference, "She's just trying to reach you," actually recurs, and we'll talk about that as well. It recurs. I mean, it's included in the first song, and then it kind of comes back in the last song. So that's significant, I think. And like I say, I hope we will talk about that. What about the actual title of the record, Relatives in Descent?
Well, with that one, it was all the other previous records. I get the line from the album, one of the lyrics, and usually it sticks out pretty obvious. Like, okay, that's can be a great title for a record and can kind of encapsulate what I'm talking about. And this time there really wasn't that jumped out, or there was a couple, but they seemed pretty obvious. So I just remember kind of actually being at the studio and kind of, looking around and trying to get inspiration for something. And I saw that, if on legal documents, your relatives that are younger than you are your relatives in the descending line. And so that means like your grandkids and your kids. And an ascending line would be like everybody that's older than you. And it just seemed like, okay, there's a lot of songs about relatives on this record. Truth can be relative, and truth is in descent. And, descent can be like descent, like Dissent. So I was like, okay, that seemed just in that like 3-word title, we can probably cover a lot of what the songs are about just with that. So
that's fascinating, because I automatically thought of your relatives as they get older, or as they suffer illness or something like that.
Right. Like, and that's all, time has a way of affecting everybody. So that's also there. But, that's one thing I wanted when I was approaching this record, is like, I got to, well, my original idea was not to get super personal, because I felt like I had gotten pretty personal on the last record. Mm-hmm. And I think if you do it, at least for me, I felt if I did it too much, it would be kind of become kind of a crutch or something, or to actually be looking for, plumbing my depths for, sad things that happened to me. So I really was hoping to be more creative or more fictional with this record.
I see. Okay.
Which is kind of weird, like going into it and then having all this stuff happen in the world. It was like, okay, I was going to try to lie my way through this whole album, and now lying is no longer cool anymore. It's actually pretty dangerous.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's begin. Let's begin with the first song on the record. It's called A Private Understanding.
Now by my own hand, automatic writing by phantom loom. Now with my own voice, pleurisy made to stand on two legs. That's how bomb I go. In this age of blasting trumpets, paradise for fools, infinite wrath, and the lowest deep, a lower depth. Don't want to hear those foul trumpets anymore.
One of the lines that stuck out for me, or at least one of the images, was this age of blasting trumpets. You repeat this phrase, in this age of blasting trumpets, I don't want to hear those vile trumpets anymore. What's the origin of that line for you?
Well, it was kind of like after the election. You know, things can feel apocalyptic all the time if you let it. And, you know, there's always the idea of trumpets being a warning, or, you know, a king will have a trumpet to announce his arrival, and it just seemed like the blaring of the trumpets were, you know, getting louder and louder around then. And it's not like, I've seen some reviews say, oh, that's obviously like he's talking about Trump supporters there. Like he's calling them trumpets. And It's not necessarily that, but it's definitely, you know, just the feeling of like, this is a new age, and this is not a very good one. And, you know, here comes the warning signs of the alarms going off, and those would be the trumpet sounds, you know. Well,
you can see how people might read into the parallel between these lyrics about a paradise for fools, infinite wrath, and the lowest deep, a lower depth, and then later the scholar will be forever poor. It does seem like you're addressing anti-intellectualism and the rise of that, and a lot of that has been associated, fairly or unfairly, with the rise of Trump and his followers. So you probably, is that fair? Can you see where people might be interpreting this?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No, it's one of those things where when you're talking, like, at least for me, when I'm talking about lyrics, a lot of times, like when I start to unpack them, it becomes like very like, well, this is obviously I meant this and that, and sometimes I don't know what I'm meaning when I come up with it, and so then it's later on that I have to apply meaning to it and try to figure it out. And I felt like, well, I don't really want to make it super obvious that that Trump specifically is the reason why I'm so pissed off right now, you know, even though that would be the case, because I figured I was more focused on how I was feeling with all the historical events going on. You don't want to, you're trying not to date your feelings too much, you know, even though in the next song I actually put a date on it, but you know, you know, you try to keep a little bit of the mystery there. But yeah, it's basically I was just feeling like, yeah, anti-intellectualism was rising, and it seems to keep on. It seems to be the new thing, you know. Mm-hmm. Being smart is stupid. All of a sudden,
yeah.
Being an expert on anything is a bad thing to be. So, you know.
Well, I think a lot of us have become sort of mired in existentialism about the state of affairs and become very philosophical about things. You actually reference a particular philosopher here.
Call me Heraclitus the Obscure. Constantly weeping because the river doesn't move, doesn't flow. It's been led by snotty men to make profit from the poor. Don't want to hear those foul trumpets anymore.
I got that out of a book. He's mentioned a little bit in this book called The Anatomy of Melancholy, which was from the, when was it made? I want to say it was like the 1600s. Mm-hmm. Might have been but it's just this guy writing about like why people are sad, and it's a very thick book from back then. And, you know, it's because it's from back then, some of it's like, well, it could be, you know, the vapors in the air that make you sad, or it could be this or that. And then he also gets very philosophical and comical about it almost, because he's collecting all these writers, you know, these philosophers and things, and what they have to say about sadness. And, you know, Heraclitus was the weeping philosopher, you know, and just reading up, like, so once I saw him in the book, I was trying to read up as much about him as I could. Mm-hmm. And it's the second time that I've come across a philosophical thing in a book and then tried to understand it in another book. And basically they say, well, we don't really know what he was talking about. We have some theories. So again, it's like, okay, I guess I can apply my own meaning to this. But his big thing was the idea that you never step in the same river twice. Even though the river is a river, because it's flowing, you can step into it and it's new, and that's kind of like how the world works. It's constant flux is the natural state. Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah. Heraclitus believed in ever-present change, I believe, right? He just believed everything was changing, and that's just the core principle of the universe, is that we just have to endure change. And I read a quote about him that associated him with this notion of the needless unconsciousness of humankind. Maybe like it's sort of like actually I was trying to unpack what that meant myself. Did that resonate with you? Have you heard that before?
Well, that was the thing, is that there's some sort of, and here's the dime store version of it. as I can understand. I'm
Cliff's noting it myself. Don't worry. I'm just trying to figure it out myself.
We don't need any experts on this. We can figure this one out ourselves. But I think the idea is like he talks about logos a lot, and that was a thing, is people trying to figure out what he meant by logos, because it can be applied to different things, and he actually kind of used it. It was almost like his cover up, just like the Age of Intellect was what's his face. This logos was his, whereas it's like, there's a logos that exists, kind of like the understanding of humanity, and the way that we interact with it is that we forget almost.
Yeah.
And it's there, but and that that kind of affected me, because I'm like, okay, I'm trying to talk about truth, and this guy that was crying and supposedly climbed into a dung pile because he was feeling sick, and that's how he died. Or one of the every story about how he died is very depressing.
Oh,
him climbing into a pile of dung is probably the saddest one. But so he's struggling all this. Way back then, like, okay, there's this private understanding that people have, and there's something that everybody knows. It's like the universal truth, but we can't articulate it, or we can't quite activate it in our brains. It's kind of like a separate part of your brain.
Right.
So I'm reading all that. I'm like, okay, that seems about right. And so that kind of took over the song.
Well, you mentioned this notion, this quote, I think, that's been ascribed to him: "No man ever steps in the same river twice." In your song, you say, "Call me Heraclitus the obscure, constantly weeping because the river doesn't move, it doesn't flow. It has been leaded by Snyder men to make profit from the poor. Again, don't want to hear those vile trumpets anymore." This made me think of Flint and the water crisis. That's an interpretation? Was that on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, that was 100%. Like, I'll cop to that. I use the term Snyder men, and our current governor is Snyder with a Y.
I see.
Instead of an I. And it just felt like that was a case where, it was man-made error based on greed and probably racism and hatred of the poor that allowed people to get poisoned and sick and die. And it's going to give children birth defects we're not going to even know about until, much long after. And it was just to save money. We talked about this a lot.
That's right.
Last time.
We did.
But to me, it just, natural disasters are terrible. But when it's something that's just designed to save a buck and it ends up killing people, and no one is really held accountable. There's a couple scapegoats they're nailing to the wall. Mm-hmm. It's just that to me is the more frustrating thing.
Yeah.
Than the world is tough and all, but it doesn't need to be that tough. We don't need to have that kind of stuff happen.
Yeah.
And the fact that it happens so close, and because we live in this age where it's just like, and maybe it's because of things being reported and the internet and all that, but these very important tragedies happen that should be immediately talked about and dealt with, and at least on a national level. This get kind of shuffled down the line, and new things get replaced, and a new tragedy happens every day.
Yes.
And so you don't really hear much about Flint anymore. Occasionally it comes up in the local news, but there's other things to weep about now. So
it does seem like that's constant, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't think any lessons were learned from Flint, which is the sad part.
I want to. There's a lot there, and we can unpack. But I do want to move on to the final passage of the song because I am quite fascinated with Elvis Presley, and this connection. You include this very vivid passage about Elvis Presley.
Mm-hmm. Elvis outside of Flagstaff, driving a camper van, looking for meaning in a cloud mass. Sees the face of Joseph Stalin and is disheartened. Then the wind changed the cloud into his smiling Lord, and he was affected profoundly, but he could never describe the feeling. He passed away on the bathroom floor.
It follows this sort of unpacking of working class life, I think, and what's going on, and Elvis has become the symbol of that on some level. Can you talk about this passage because it invokes Elvis, it invokes Joseph Stalin? It's remarkable, actually. Can you tell me about it?
Well, I was reading I think his name is Peter Guralnick.
Peter Guralnick, yeah.
Yeah, he has two books about Elvis, and the first one is, it goes all the way up until he gets out of the army and his mom dies, and it's kind of like the ascendancy of Elvis.
Last Train to Memphis.
Last Train to Memphis, yeah. And then the second one is, I believe, Careless Love.
That's correct.
And that's kind of like a slow kind of unwinding, you know. And what I did was I got both those books at a used bookstore on tour, and I didn't know much about Elvis. I wouldn't consider myself like an Elvis fan. And for some reason, I was drawn to read the second book first.
Oh.
So I read that one first, and then I went back and I read the other one. But in the second one, it's just kind of this slow decline. You know, when he went into the army, that's when he got kind of addicted to pills, which would be what killed him eventually. But you know, he's a very vibrant character in this book. It's, you know, I would suggest people read it if they want to read a good book.
These are two of the greatest books I've ever read. I will put that out there, and I've said this before, and I was very fortunate to have Peter Guralnick on this show to talk about his most recent book about Sam Phillips, and I spent a considerable amount of time telling him how much those Elvis books mean to me. Because beyond the story of Elvis, they're just, I mean, beyond the fact that it is Elvis, they're amazing stories. Just as a cultural arc, it's fascinating, endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, it's just you get like a sense of the history around him and what he was kind of like going through, and then there's Elvis in the middle, and you're hearing all these stories, and he still is at the end of the book. He's still kind of a mystery figure in a sense. You know? And but what fascinated me about that particular story was just, you know, the idea that he would drive his buddies around. Mm-hmm. You know, we like to think of like the Memphis Mafia and all that as just like, you know, end up being kind of thuggish, but at the time it just seems like he just needed his core group of buddies around him just to kind of stay normal. And the idea that he would just go on these trips where he'd drive them around, you know, the biggest, you know, rock star, the biggest star in the world, driving his buddies, was kind of a nice thing. But just at the time, he was really trying to seek answers. You know, he was really excited about trying to find the meaning of life.
And I will say, like, he's a cultural trailblazer who's the victim of cultural change. Like, he doesn't survive, essentially. He doesn't thrive as the culture he invented changes. Right.
And it's just like, I just like the idea of him as a seeker, at least in the middle of that second book, where he's really trying to, you know, he's trying to be a better person. He's really, you know, and I think a lot, you know, I've never really done that. And maybe I'm doing, you know, so just the fact that he would, you know, have these feelings and try to look for answers. And just like this part that pops up in the book is just like, it's such a bizarre, I had to read it. Like, I remember being in the van and reading that part and then immediately going, hey, fellas, like, let me read this a little bit to you.
Yeah.
Like this, you know, because we're driving in a van, you know, in the middle of nowhere. And it's like the idea that, like, he first saw Joseph Stalin in a cloud and just like, oh, what does it mean? Like, he's really trying to figure out, like, why God or whatever would show him Joseph Stalin in the cloud, and kind of freaking out about it, and then having it turn into Jesus and him going, aha, I get it, and then but you never see exactly like what he tries to talk to his buddy about, like what his more spiritual buddy, what it all meant, and he couldn't quite figure out what it meant, and then his story goes on, but just that idea that he had an epiphany in the desert is kind of a nice visual for me.
Yeah. There's all sorts of little subtle things about Guralnick's books. He was on a panel once with Greil Marcus, and Greil Marcus said, there's a line about the 68 comeback special where you say that at the end of it, Elvis was literally spent. What did that mean? And Guralnick said, well, he came. He actually came in his pants performing.
So it's those tight leather pants, man. They can do that.
You're just like, oh my God, like what is happening? Like the book is, and I read that the first time and I didn't even think of it. I just thought, he must have been tired.
Yeah, really tired out. Yeah.
Anyway, it's fascinating to me that you picked out one of these many remarkable passages to sing about.
And I just want what I thought was another little funny thing was our drummer Alex had been playing like some Al Stewart in the van when we were driving around, or he had played it before. Mm-hmm. And I guess a couple not too long ago, Al Stewart wrote a song about the whole song is just about that portion of the book. So he's got a song about that moment too, and it's just like, oh, okay, well that must have been an important part of the book, because it's been sung about before. Yeah.
Speaking of your drummer, I kind of think of the main riff in this song as being the drum beat. Does that make sense?
Yes. What was interesting about this one was this is a song that Greg, our guitar player, actually had like a demo of it, where he actually kind of had like that weird drum beat. Like he had come up with that drum beat, and then like Alex kind of developed it further to make it actually, work.
Oh, okay.
But it was like definitely, it kind of came out of Greg's head complete as a song. And so that's kind of the first time that's ever happened where he like just brought in a demo and he's like, here's an idea I have. And it was like, okay, this is a complete song. This is done.
Yeah.
Just got to put stuff on it. So that was, and it's almost like that was his epiphany. He just had this one song. And from then on, it was like, okay, this album, I wasn't worried about the album after we had this song, and I could think about, and that's why I think the lyrics out of all of them is like the most kind of thought over and plotted and stuff, because I had the longest time to work on them.
Well, I'm a fan of your band generally, but I think I've made a point of telling you that your drummer Alex Leonard is fantastic. I was just really blown away by, particularly seeing you live for the first time. I mean, the whole experience of seeing Protomartyr is quite overwhelming, but I just found his drumming to be, it really stands out on this record, I think, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm glad he does, because it's like, I think it's one of those things that I don't think people necessarily pick up on the record. Sometimes they might just go like, oh, it's a weird drum beat. But you really have to kind of see it live to be like, okay, this guy is doing something very bizarre.
Yeah.
I think people sometimes focus too much. Oh, the lead singer looks weird, and he sings. But the band. What's interesting is the band is all doing something completely different.
Yes,
and it somehow works. Scott's got like a 2-step dance that he does, laying down the bass, and it's I don't know exactly how it works. And sometimes people say it doesn't work, but all three of them are doing something different, and I'm doing something different. It's quite bizarre.
Yeah, and it does. You're right. For some reason, I think all of that pops out a bit more on this record than maybe some of the previous ones. Before we leave, we spent a lot of time on A Private Understanding, but before we leave it, I must ask about this line. As I mentioned earlier, it will recur in Half Sister, which closes the record, but this line, she's just trying to reach you.
She's just trying to reach you. She's just trying to reach you. She's just trying to reach you. She's just trying to reach you. She's just trying to reach you. She's just trying to reach you. She's just trying to reach you.
Well, and this song, because the lyrics were one of the last ones to write, like the two last ones I wrote were actually Half Sister and the Private Understanding. But I had, like, you know, when we were practicing the song, like in our practice space before we go in the studio, I'm occasionally throwing out things that I kind of get stuck in my head when I'm listening to it when I'm driving around. And She's Trying to Reach You was stuck in my head for this one. And I didn't know. I was like, okay, you know, what's she? I don't know what she is. I best to put a woman on the cover of the record because I have a feeling that she's going to be reoccurring because it was something easy to sing over the end.
Right.
And at first it was like kind of like a placeholder, like, okay, this is a long part. I'll just kind of get a repeated phrase here going, but I'll think of something, you know, I'll think of some words later. But just as I'm doing it, I'm like, okay, I like how long I'm repeating it because especially with this album, I really was like, okay, I got to think how I'm going to be singing this stuff live. Because in the past, sometimes I didn't. And then I go out and try to sing songs live and it's a struggle. And so I was like, okay, I got to, you know, I'll have something to sing here, and it'll be, you know, I'm sure, you know, I have some sort of meaning. And then as I'm doing it in practice, and you have to do it so many times, it becomes more strength. It's fun. It's a joy to put an emotional thought into it as you're singing it, because it is after these pretty glum and downcast ideas at the beginning of the song. It is kind of the light shining through a little bit, like, okay, you know, she's trying to reach you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, she's trying. You might not be trying to reach her, but she's out there trying to reach you.
Yeah, there is something kind of hopeful about that
You know.
that notion. Yeah. Okay. All right. Like I say, I think we have totally figured out that song. I mean, that song's done. I don't.
That's 100%. That's 100% understood now. Yeah.
We're gonna move on to Here Is the Thing.
Well, here's the thing. Open and dead, pen his head shut. New face, love surveillance, comic sans, pen and ape. Here's the thing now. From foot to gut, come on, stone, wicked stone. Pass through, pass my pain. Take everything, reach rock, roll. Pass through silent, put shiny base oils, fresh in a pot. For sales from an old goat in the gut. Here's the thing, here's the thing. And I will be with you for the rest of your life.
Just in general, you know, this one is kind of it's almost the exact same, at least in my mind, almost the exact same structure as the previous song, except it's a lot more local and has to do a lot more of like stuff in Detroit and kind of how much Detroit has changed since the first record, and like kind of just an update on it, but also applying, like, you know, this feeling, this universal feeling that seems to be happening, and seeing how I feel about it in relation to Detroit.
Do you have particular issues with sports?
No, I like them. I just feel like I like the Tigers quite a bit. That's my team. Greg is a Lions guy. He likes the Detroit Lions. Scott is a Red Wings fan. My issue is just the idea that we've just gotten out of bankruptcy as a city, and we give this a lot of money to the Illiches, who are very, very rich, to build a stadium, and they always try to present it as this is going to be a benefit to Detroit, and it happens all over the place, and it never works out that way. And people are starting to get wise to the idea of, like, let's not give a ton of money to somebody to build a stadium, because then they'll try to replace them in 10, 15 years. And especially since our schools are so bad, like we have no money for the schools in Detroit, but at least they're going to build a stadium, you know.
Yeah, they defunded all the funding. Rather, they defunded your school system in your city. You were saying that the last time.
Yeah.
So Here's the Thing is kind of this weird phrase that's popped up now. It's like the beginning of an explanation that
right.
someone might be like, here's the thing. You know, that's the way you would talk. But I couldn't help but think the thing here was the stadium.
Yeah, well, I say here's the thing a lot. Sometimes after I had a couple drinks, I'm like, oh, here's the thing. Enough that, like, Alex pointed out to me once. He's like, you say hears the thing quite a lot. And I was like, okay, well, I guess it has to be a name of a song now, idiot. So that was but the thing basically, like a more, larger thing, it's basically capitalism,
I see.
And it's basically just, especially in America, this kind of unfettered capitalism that, is all consuming and affects everything. And, it benefits the rich. It's a great thing if you're rich. I tell you, I wish I was.
Yeah.
Because I'd love living in America if I was wealthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, so that's basically the thing. But especially since Detroit right now, especially downtown, is getting gentrified and changed. And some of that is really good. And I don't want to be like a naysayer. It's great to have new people move in. We can tax them and hopefully get the schools better again and the services better.
Yeah.
But it just seems like a weird sort of time in Detroit right now because it's changing very fast. And it's changing like every place else I've seen gentrification change. And it doesn't seem to be focused on the people that live in the city at all.
Yeah.
So it's weird.
The whole song in terms of your singing and phrasing is something of a flurry of words, but there's a passage here that I wanted to ask you about specifically because it's sort of unusual. It's the passage that begins with "from foot to gut," and
yes.
It's just another larger flurry. What's going on there?
Well, with that one, it was around the time that, like, coming off a tour, I get like aches and pains, and when I'm old enough now that every time I get an ache and pain, I'm like, okay, what is that? I'm a little bit more fearful of aches and pains. And for a while, I just had like a shooting pain that went from like my foot all the way up to my gut. And I was like, okay, that's no good. But then I was thinking, okay, I don't really have, I have health insurance, but it's not very good, and I pay a lot for it. So a lot of times you just kind of like, okay, I'll put it off. I won't worry about it. It will go away. And so from there, I'm like, okay, like let's kind of extrapolate that feeling of hoping it just goes away. There's a lot of like right now, and the guy that's kind of in charge, because Illich, the fellow that owns the Red Wings and Little Caesars, he passed away this year. Mm-hmm. So like there's a new fella, Dan Gilbert, who's kind of like the new billionaire on the scene, and he does a lot of like altruistic things, sort of. But he also gets paid to do it, It's kind of like his brand is that, and he does like, on one hand, we hear these things that he's going to build like these buildings and he's going to bring in these new jobs and stuff like that. But it just seems weird because he also puts up surveillance cameras everywhere downtown.
Yeah.
He has his own security force. He just seems to be like I think maybe most billionaires are weird, but like there's something weird about him where all this like largesse and being nice it seems to be a front for something. I don't know what it is.
There's always fascism within the billionaire class, isn't there?
Yeah, it's like, but I can see that happening. Like you've amassed all this money, you can't just like live amongst the people. You have to kind of control as much as you can,
Yeah.
or you feel like you can. And so there is this kind of this double thing where it's like we basically just gave him the keys to the city to do whatever he wants.
Yeah,
and some of that is like putting a surveillance camera that was pointing into the Detroit Free Press office, like right into the office.
Yeah.
For what reason? Who knows? But it just seems like, okay, that's a weird thing to live under.
Well,
and so he loves surveillance and he loves Comic Sans. And the name of his he's got Rock Financial is one of his companies. And
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So
this explains that reach rock roll aspect.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I kind of wanted, like you want like a cadence, in an old timey rock and roll songs, it'd be like hey, let's rock and roll, like, and so, the Rock Financial is like one of his, and Quicken Loans is his other one. So it's Quicken, pass through, pass without
I
paying.
I see. Okay. It's coming through now. I appreciate the insight. That's true. Okay.
That's one of those ones where I'm like, if someone doesn't get it, who cares? It's not, I don't think it's important to the song at all.
No, it is. I think it is. I mean, I saw little things like that. I didn't really understand reach rock roll, so I appreciate that. But it's a very sinister song, which made me a sinister sounding song, and it made me think of the Jesus Lizard. And I don't know if you talk amongst yourselves about bands you like or influences. Do you like the Jesus Lizard? Anybody?
I didn't really listen to much at all, and I don't know. if the other fellas have, like, we've been compared enough to them, and I always think, like, oh boy, like they're actually, like, the sound and it's much bigger than the sound that we're making. So I always feel it's a bad comparison, because I'm like, we're going to sound like a wimpier version if we get compared at all. I know.
This does happen. You get compared.
So yeah. I mean, we get comparisons to a lot of bands, and some of them I'm like, okay, I can see that, and then some of them like, I get it, but like that's like they're making a much more brutal sound than us necessarily. But yeah, like they're I'd say like maybe a band like Piss Jeans are probably closer to them than we are.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I've talked to Piss Jeans about that too, and they've had to deal with that too. I think it's something about Greg's guitar playing though as well. Like it's a very sophisticated guitar approach, and I think that it reminds people of Dwayne Dennison a little bit, maybe. I don't know, and then you're a gruff singer, and it's very vivid lyricism, and I think David Yao did a lot of that as well. So anyway, I don't often think this about you guys. I can't actually, on some level, I'm not hunting for influences when I listen to you. I think you're your own thing, but this song in particular, as I say, it's a sinister song. It seems to be about a dark thing, and that's what I associate with them as well. And for some reason, the music here did remind me of that. I will say I love the Jesus Lizard, so it's meant to be a compliment.
Well, I've said this before, but when someone compares us to a great band, I always say I take that as a compliment. I'm just worried the Jesus Lizard will take it as an insult. It's just, I like it.
No, knowing them as much as I do, I don't know them very well, but I think they would be flattered, and I think they're an underground band whose influence is present in a lot of new music. But even the Piss Jeans conversation, they were like, you know what, we get that all the time. Never heard them. Like I hadn't listened to them. So that is a weird, I think if I were them, that's a weird testament. Like the music is pervasive and people don't even know the source. Like I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's the case with them is that, I know as any kid growing up when Nirvana came out, like I had the one split CD or whatever it was where like they had a song.
Oh, yeah,
and
that's
Nirvana
right.
had a song.
Yeah.
And so that was like my one kind of run. And I remember at the time, I should go back and listen to it. I remember at the time being like, this is too scary. I didn't.
It was Puss. That's right. The Jesus song was Puss. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they were scary, and I got to see them a lot. So, and I was scared. So, and this song is, if you delve into the song, it's a little scary. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we should move on. We're going to move on to the next song, which is My Children.
Great, pass on. Pass on, what's mine now yours. Pass on. Written in stone, no longer in sand, pass on. Pass on to great, what's mine now yours. I'm gone, pass on. To great, pass on. What's mine now yours, I'm gone, pass on. To great, and stone, not sand, pass on, I'm gone. To great, pass on, and stone, pass on. All mine for yours, pass on. To give all, pass on. Next mine, now gone, pass on.
I have children. Do you have children?
I do not, no.
This song is about the next generation having to deal with a bunch of shit, I think. A little bit. What's your... Where did this come from for you?
Partially, yeah. It's got like 3 or 4 feelings jammed into this one. I had the title for a long time. Because I was like, okay, I'm 40 now, and my prospects of having children are 0 at this moment. But it's, when I was younger, I was like, okay, when I have a kid and I have a job, and, I would always picture this future, for myself, being a father. And it's one of those things you kind of have to, think about. Not as much. I think women have to think about it more because they have the window kind of closes. Mm-hmm. But I felt it where I'm like, okay, I'm getting pretty old here. Like the idea of having children is less and less, especially being in a band and not really being very stable, financially or mentally. So it's, you start thinking about that, like, what am I leaving behind? And at the same time, you're trying to write songs, and you're trying to figure out why the hell you feel like you need to write songs, or like what kind of emotional thing is making you do this, And so it's like, okay, like maybe these songs are my children,
Oh.
Maybe this is what I'm trying to leave behind, and but then it's also thinking about, okay, like that's kind of a weird, it's a selfish act, I think, in a sense that you're trying to like pass on your personality to the next generation, so they remember you, and you're trying to hopefully do it. The only reason I really wanted to have kids when I was younger was like, oh, I can't wait to tell them stuff that Dad taught me.
Oh, interesting.
And so you're kind of like keeping the line going in a sense. So all that stuff is like boiling around in my head, and then of course, again, the election and kind of the state of the world was like, okay, it'll be a weird time. Maybe you can tell me it'd be a weird time to have kids, I think. And just the idea of like trying to pass stuff down, and then there's also the idea of like, how older people always think the kids are stupid,
Right. Yeah.
And they don't listen, they're on drugs, blah, 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 and some of that might be true, but that might just because we're passing down worse and worse information. So all that's in there.
Well, it's fascinating, this notion that you thought of your songs as children. That totally, that just blew my mind. As I scan the lyrics here, that makes more sense to me. I do want to ask about a reference to Suffragette City by David Bowie. Bowie was on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, he had died, and there's a lot of documentaries, and so, Greg, I would say, is the Bowie head in the band, and he bought like a bunch of books and was reading them, and it was really kind of like kind of doing the same thing I was doing with the Elvis book, like, oh yeah, this is an interesting story here, and blah blah blah, and I just felt like, with Suffragette City, I don't know what any of the lyrics are, and that's almost kind of the thing, in a weird sidebar, is people always like, oh, your lyrics are so great, or like, oh, like you put so much thought into them, or blah blah blah, and it's like, well, a lot of times you don't even listen to the lyrics. Most people don't. They're not the most important thing in the song. They're almost like place fillers. So like, I like Suffragette City, but really the only part that I understand is the "Don't Lean on Me, Man" part.
Right.
And here it is, like one of my favorite songs, and I have not really sat down and pored over the lyrics and the meaning of it. And so I think it's funny, like, you're the lyricist, you're supposed to be plumbing your soul for this great stuff, and, these are your children, and really they can be passed over. They're basically just, mouth sounds, really, at the end of the day. So that's kind of my complicated feeling about lyrics,
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's very fascinating. Is there anything you want to say about the music on My Children?
No, it was a song that we had early on, and I think I like the build a lot, and then I like where it goes from there.
Okay.
And I can, on tour when I do it live, I just kind of improvise the first part, knowing that's going to speed up eventually, and then the song is going to kick in. So I can have that part will probably constantly be changing as it goes along.
Oh, I see. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's get to the next song here. It's called Katrina.
They bathe me, they clothe me, not in the dress I loved all those years ago. They drop me in the cheap pot to save a couple times, seems like such a crime. And all that loving that's leaving the place now, we're complaining down in this hole. And I'll be spitting on the living till I get my cross some kind of martyr stone.
Can I throw a wild stab at the dark about where I think this came from?
Okay.
Well, I'm probably way offline here, but I saw this line about, and I'll be spitting on the living till I get my cross of is it Connemara stone?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then that made me think that the song might be about or referencing the Irish poet Katrina O'Reilly. Is that nuts?
It's totally nuts. No, yeah, that's no. This is the great and sad thing about explaining lyrics is I think people sometimes have better, or they'll get a connection to it, and it's. I hate the idea.
There's an Irish connection there. Just so I didn't really explain that, but I believe Connemara is a region in Ireland, and then I thought of Katrina O'Reilly because she's a poet that delves into that country. That's why I thought of all those things.
Yeah. Well, that's the great thing about lyrics. If you do pore over them, you can make your own connections, and the word should fire off different thoughts. That's why, explaining things sometimes can ruin it a little bit because someone's what they take out of a song is just as important as what I put in.
Well, I mean, I will argue that was my interpretation, and in a way, even though you're the writer, your writing is an interpretation of life in a sense. So it's just like an endless cycle of interpreting something.
Well, and that's the great thing because here's the segue.
Yes,
the song is actually an interpretation of a book. By a guy named Martin O'Caden, or it's actually pronounced Martin O'Kine. It looks like Caden. But he was an Irish writer, and he wrote in Irish, and his one book is called, I don't know how to pronounce it in Irish, but it's been translated into The Dirty Dust and Cemetery Clay, I think is the other title of it. So it's got two different translations from into English. And so I read both of them because I read the first one. I read The Dirty Dust. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I read the second one, and it was almost completely different.
Oh,
it was a little bit more. It wasn't. Dirty Dust is very kind of colloquial, and it kind of makes words up because translating from Irish, I guess, is notoriously difficult.
Yes.
And so the reading these two versions, like I don't even know if I actually read the book now. I can't say that I read it. But the book is about Katrina, who dies, and she gets buried in the local. It takes place in Western Ireland, like in the Irish-speaking part of Ireland, kind of like near Connemara. And once she goes in the cemetery, she just keeps talking, and everybody else in the cemetery talks, and they're just yelling at each other, and they're just talking about like old grievances, and it like takes place a little bit after World War II. So there's like a French pilot's plane crashes, so he's buried there. And so he's speaking French, and everyone's like, "Oh, shut up! I don't know what you're saying." And they're complaining, they're gossiping about like the people up in the town. And Katrina just wants the cross of Connemara stone. Like Connemara stone is like a very nice stone, and but her son, she keeps on hearing from up above that her son keeps on spending the money that was supposed to be for her cross and other things, on his wife, and and so it's constantly like, I'm going to keep on, being agitated about this until I get my damn cross. That's all I want. So it's very comical. It's it's kind of dark too, but it's a really funny book. At least the two versions I read. Whether maybe the other one isn't, but that was kind of like the And then, so that's how it kind of fits into the theme of all the other ones, was just like, okay, this is another thing about family and about being disappointed. Like, it's a person like regretting, kind of like, oh, my stupid son. She's always making fun of how dumb her son is. And I was like, okay, this is, especially after the last album where I opened myself up to talk about my parents and things. I was like, and talk about the afterlife is this big romantic thing that, to have an afterlife this comical and this kind of like, this seemed to be like, okay, yeah, if the way the world exists now, this is like what the afterlife is going to be. It's going to be complaining and moaning and groaning. And so that was kind of like where the lyric ideas came from.
Yeah.
Directly that book.
Right. Well, it's very funny, and it's very, I like the kind of noirish aspect to it. The music, in turn, is almost pop. It's almost upbeat. Yeah, and I'm glad because we an easy thing we get tagged with all the time is that this is dark and gloomy and
and the music is dark and gloomy. But these guys can really rip, and they can, and it's fun. That's a song that's fun to sing live because you're singing in the voice of an old woman that's been dead and complaining, with this kind of like almost joyous music behind you.
Yeah.
It's just kind of it's a nice thing to sing.
Absolutely. No, it's a great song.
To save a couple times seems like such a crime. And all that loving that's leaving the place now with complaining down in this hole. And I'll be spitting on the living till I get my cross a kind of stone.
Stop worrying about what to make for dinner and start cooking instead. HelloFresh Canada will send a box of wholesome ingredients plus a simple-to-follow recipe right to your Canadian doorstep. Vegetarians, meat eaters, single people, families, there's something for almost everyone. Visit HelloFresh.ca for more info and menu options and use the promo code CREATIVE50 for 50% off your first order. Creative Control once again acknowledges the support of FreshBooks, a cloud accounting software for small business owners with some truly thoughtful features that you'll love. Try it free for 30 days. Go to freshbooks.com/creative control and in the How Did You Hear About Us section, enter Creative Control. That's creative with a K and control with a K. Organize your money and get paid faster with FreshBooks.
We're going to move on to the Chuckler.
And there are lots of me then, and that is less to me now. All calls are answered, it's no bother. I just wanted to talk to a direct marketer from Bangalore, or was it Mahabali Peron?
Last time you and I spoke, you described, you invoked the phrase chuckling as kind of a hollow form of laughter, and we were talking about how the only way to react to the ascent of Trump was to laugh initially, and then as it got more and more real, the laughter descended into kind of hollow chuckling. I remember you saying that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if, when I look at this, or rather when I listen to the song and when I process the lyrics, it is a lot of kind of half-hearted laughter at weird, dark things. Can you unpack what this song, where the song came from?
That's pretty much it. I had the title The Chuckler for a while. I didn't know what song it was going to be for, but yeah, I mean, it's basically like you're living a life, and in this time, the character has a pretty bad job, where he has to deal with customers all the time. And, there's a sense of like loneliness and separation from people, and you're trying to get through your day. So, everything, you kind of have to take a comic approach to life, I think. And so the mundane issues that you're dealing with in life is one thing. And then this kind of big axe hanging over your head of like, is there going to be another big, we're still in wars. We've kind of forgot that we're still in wars. And now Trump's picking fights with North Korea for some reason. Like what? And then, just the world news churning, all the terrible devastation and things happening. And really, you're just trying to, get a paycheck and go through your life. I think most people are like that. But, and you're trying to just laugh your way through it. But it just, after a while, like just the other day, they're like, oh, Saturday Night Live is back to really take it to Trump. And it's like, oh, that's great and all, but it didn't work.
No.
It's not working.
No.
All these jokes aren't working.
Yeah, I've made this point before, even talking to comedians on this show, that I'm worried that satire has been rendered ineffectual because you have the ultimate joke running things now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so that's kind of, that was the thing with that one. And then it was another one where it's like Alex has this very interesting drum beat running throughout, and it just, for me, it just kind of seemed like a ticking clock or almost like a ticker tape or something, just
constant build, just a constantly building song. It feels like, that doesn't quite resolve itself,
right?
Which gives it a real tension, I think.
Mm-hmm. So that was that one. Yeah.
Did you outline here a dialogue with a telemarketer, and my conversations with telemarketers always end up with them calling me a motherfucker. Like,
really?
Always. Yeah. You think you're funny? fucker. Like, they just scream that at me, and I have to deal with it. And because I lead them on, you know, I tell them my house is, they're like, how you do air duct cleaning services? And I tell them I live in a mansion with 13 bathrooms, and I just keep going. And then they're like, well, how many square feet is it? And I say, it's 1,000 square feet. You know, I just do stupid things because I'm annoyed. Right. And then they just scream at me. And I thought of your song here because I think you have certain empathy for the customer service trade here, that you know, this notion of these people are just trying to live their lives and make a buck, and here we are maybe condescending to some of them. Right.
And that's, I mean, I hate them. I don't like them.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, a long time ago we signed up for something, you know, like some government program where you're supposed to be on the do not call list, and you're not supposed to get these calls.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and I don't even know why we still have a phone in this house that I'm living in. But because those are the only calls that we get.
Same here. I have the landline too. I have the landline, and that's all I get, pretty much.
Yeah. And I used to, you know, be worried, like, okay, I need to have the phone because mom's friends might call and ask about her, and I got to tell her, okay, no, she lives with my brother now, you know. But that kind of stopped, you know. Yeah. Nobody's calling the house except for these people.
Yeah.
And what I hate, the one, you know, because sometimes now I just kind of let it ring a lot, but sometimes, you know, I'll pick it up and it's just like dead. It's not even.
They take a second because they're using a machine, and then they chime in after like 10 seconds or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I also have the fear where they have this thing where they try to get you to say yes, and then they can record you saying yes, and then they can apply that. You know, he agreed to this and that. So it's always like you're always on edge when you pick up the phone now and it rings, and so it's like, yeah. I mean, I get, and that's I don't like. I hate it when people are like, oh, like they're all foreigners, and you know they use these fake names, and you know, screw them. Yeah. But, you know, it's like, again, they're trying to get a job, and they're just trying to, you know, that's their job, you know. And so the guy in the song, he has a job where he has like customers yelling at him all the time, and you know, he can try to have a laugh about that, but then, you know, he goes home and, you know, these people are trying to, you know, get a buck out of him. It's just, you know, this constant thing, and you got to try to, you know, at least it's not a robot on the other end of the line.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective there, because I don't have much sympathy for them. I feel bothered, and the tone is often, and it's all, for me, they're always trying to rip you off. I mean, my dad fell victim to one of these scams. I couldn't believe it. My dad used to lock every door and hyper concerned, and he just went in with this guy, and this guy just wanted to, you know, the one where they call you to say there's something wrong with your Windows computer. Have you ever had that one?
Oh, no, yeah.
They just specifically say, we are detecting an issue with your Windows computer, and people fall for it. And my dad I think he screen shared something, and I couldn't believe it, my dad. So yeah, I have little sympathy for them. I appreciate your perspective. I think they're scum. I think they're...
You know, well, it's true, because I noticed, because on some record somewhere it says that my mom lives in the house and she's in her 80s. You do start getting all these calls where they're really hoping to fool an old person.
Yes.
You know, and that's like, they'll do things like, I get calls all the time like, oh, this is a collection agency. I'm like, well, who are you calling for? And they're like, well, no, you call back this number and we'll, you know, explain it to you. Yeah. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that, man.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah. So I'm not. I have a very bad feeling about humanity, but I guess on this song, the character just was at such a low point that the only person he could talk to was a telemarketer.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's fair. All right. Now we move on to I think we're at the halfway point of the record. We are at a song that I can sort of relate to as a Canadian, I think. It's called Windsor Hum. Mm-hmm.
Sound
in Detroit. Right across the river is Windsor.
Yeah.
So it is, which is Canada. So you are in a border town. What is that like for you to live so close to another country that I can't? I think you're suggesting that it feels like you could escape to another country. I'm not sure. What can you say about this song?
No, it's more about like what America is sending out into the world. The Windsor hum is actually like a real thing, coming from the American side and noise polluting the Canadian side.
Oh,
it's they trace it back to this island that's owned by U.S. Steel called Zug Island, Z-U-G, Zug. It looks like a Zug Island. It looks very. It's like an industrial island in the Detroit River, and it's putting out some low frequency that hits the Canadian side. Somehow it bounces off the water and it's driving people insane.
Oh.
And there's really nothing, because it's not conclusive that it's coming from Zug Island. And U.S. Steel, it's actually, because they pull so much money, and it's probably never going to stop. And people are saying like they have to move because the sound is just constant and it picks up at night. And they think it's a blast furnace that's on the island.
Oh,
that's making this sound.
That's weird, and they can't do anything about it.
Well, Canada's trying to work what happens is Zug Island is actually part of like this town called River Rouge, which is kind of like a very small little town, and that like U.S. Steel would be like their main where they get most of their money from, is the big industry in town. And so I don't think they want to do anything about it, and I don't think I think it's one of those weird sort of border disputes that will never be solved.
Well, the lyric here, like you mentioned, it's sort of what America's putting out into the world. The sound across the river into your brain pan saying everything's fine. The sound going across the ocean saying everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everything is fine is an interesting thing that we say to each other sometimes when nothing is fine.
Yeah, we got the best people on the job. Everyone's saying we're doing a great job.
Yeah,
you got to support the flag 100%.
Empty reassurances, basically.
Empty reassurances, and just and so I've seen takes on where people say, "Oh, he lives near Canada," and he's thinking, "Oh, Canada's so great." No, it's fine, but it's more about just kind of like this weird. I'm sure. So I read somewhere that people were like, some Americans are figuring out for the first time how the world has sought them for a long time. That because we actually have this fella in the office, it's like, oh, now I get it. Now I see how we come across as these big idiots that throw money around and are quick to temper and violent and disgusting.
But when you write here, it says want what you are given, need what you'll never have, and never will. What is that a reference to?
It's just I think that's kind of I think a lot of and this is just my dumb take, but I feel like a lot of like the anger and the reason why maybe Trump got in the office, besides racist finally having a guy that they could get behind, was also I think some people were generally like, I'm sick of politicians. I'll put anybody in. I just want to shake things up. And I think a lot of that is because a lot of people just feel like the American dream they're being sold, that you'll be able to live comfortably and you'll have money to give to your kids, and you can buy nice things. It's just not true. They're not seeing it.
Yeah.
And so like you're told constantly like, oh, strive and you'll get what you want, and you'll but I think more it's like people are being told that they need these things, and they need to be a good American you better have some money. And so it's kind of like this weird sort of thing, and I think it's starting to fall apart a little bit.
Yeah, so people are interpreting, and myself included, interpreting it to be kind of a song about Canada, but it's really, really a song about America and its place in the world. Okay. Yeah. I also want to point out again, not to over-flatter Alex Leonard, drumming on this song, also amazing.
Yeah, I think we can say that for every single song. Maybe one where I'm like, no, you know what? He wasn't that hot. He really stunk up the joint that day.
No, it's just particularly good beats is all I'm saying. He's just good at coming up with interesting beats.
Yeah.
The next song is Don't Go to Anecada. Is this an actual place?
No, and I made sure to Google it to make sure it wasn't an actual place because I didn't want to shit on people that didn't need to be shit on. But yeah, it's just I made it up for a song "Born to Be Wine." I mentioned it in a song that we did last year for like a single, and I just wanted like a fake place that I could put characters in, or talk about like America, for instance, and not be like. Be too obvious with it.
Okay.
Like too, straight ahead. And specifically, it's more about kind of like, every state's got them. There's a lot on the West Coast, and then just older ones on the East Coast, with these kind of affluent suburbs that exist in almost a bubble. And it's like, it's almost like a liberal utopia,
right?
But then it's all fiction. It's not. They're not actually liberal. They're liberal in the sense that they can go to yoga and they can go to Whole Foods and that's like the extent of they're selfish in a sense. And so there's a lot of places like that in America, and I think where it's just like I don't actually want to deal with things that I don't want to deal with poor people. I don't want to deal with immigrants and things. Meanwhile, this whole economy is being operated by immigrants and taken care of by immigrants. Like your beautiful trees in your town are being tended by migrant workers. So it's kind of it's just a distancing act that a lot of people have when they live in these nice places.
Do you think that the issue of gentrification, and I mean it's a complex issue, do you think it's addressed enough? Like what's going on with the displacement that is caused by gentrification?
You see, that's the thing. I'm no expert. It is complicated because I think when I know it's bad is when somebody that's like a landowner or they just sit on land for a long time. They buy up everything, and then they wait for the time to cash in. And that's what happened to Detroit. People are like, oh, Detroit's crumbling. It's not like nobody owned those buildings. All those buildings were owned by people that lived in the suburbs, and they were just waiting for the time to unload or to make hay,
Yeah.
And so now the time is coming. So now, people are getting kicked out of places that, were left to be in ruin. And, people in Detroit were just like, okay, fine. That's the way it's going to be. We're going to live like this. And now they're going to come in and build these new condos. So I don't know exactly who they're for, but it seems like that's kind of like the go-to plan. Like I think people have meetings where they say, hey, here's how we're going to gentrify a place. You build all these shitty condos, and it's almost like it reminds me of like when this is a dumb analogy, but the first time you ever saw a pretzel bun, we're like, oh, this place you can buy a sandwich with a pretzel bun. This is so great, And then all of a sudden, boom, you can't go anywhere, and everything's got pretzel buns, or pumpkin spice lattes or whatever. The first time you see it, like, oh, this is so interesting. But then it's repeated, it just becomes this is the way we do it. And that's what's disheartening to me, is it's not a Detroit answer to growth. It's just a universal way. Like, hey, okay, now we can have this restaurant in here, but it'll be more expensive than the restaurant that was here before. Or now we're going to have a grocery here, but it's not going to be a regular grocery store. It's going to be a super fancy grocery store. And it's because we need to attract people that have money.
Yeah, when you invoke kombucha here, for some reason, that's the word that stuck out at me the most, is this kind of symbol of intellectual, righteous comfort, I can't explain it. And it's this superiority thing where it kind of, you're enjoying a slight luxury in life while, like you say, inside your horribly made condo, and maybe the kombucha is the comfort food to get over the fact that, people have been displaced. It's not necessarily a good thing that you're doing what you're doing. It's
right.
I mean,
on the side of the kombucha bottle, there might be like a uplifting slogan, or they might say, "Oh, we give, this is all GMO," or whatever Yeah, it's no offense to kombucha drinkers, and if you want to drink snot, you go right ahead and drink it. but it's just, to me, it just stuck out that was and one of the things was like after the election, we played Las Vegas the night of the election, which is weird because we never played Las Vegas before, and it was weird waking up and we're like, okay, now we got to get something to eat. We're all pretty bummed, and so we're like, oh, let's go to Whole Foods, and you go to Whole Foods. And it seems like the world didn't change. Everybody's smiling and happy and, buying their expensive food and, getting their fancy, this and that. And it's like, okay, yeah, this didn't affect these people at all,
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of bizarre. And then driving out of town, you drive past the Trump Tower in Vegas. She's like, oh, this is the world we're living in now. So it's, just that feeling that, that kind of liberalism that's all about the self.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to be who I want to be. Thank you, liberalism. But nobody else. I don't give a shit about anybody else.
Right. Well, it's another darkly themed song with an upbeat musical arrangement again. Verse, chorus, verse, bridge. And again, I think you alluded to this earlier. It's sort of meant to... They go hand in hand. They're complementary. They're meant to kind of offset each other in some ways, I think, the music with some of the imagery. Is that fair? Yeah.
And And then... besides, I don't want to the fake liberals. They're in there, but there's also like the righteous Christian is also in there.
Yeah.
They all live in the same town.
Yeah.
Where it's like it's this high and mighty thing where you don't think about other people, or if you do think about them, you think about them very abstract ideas, or oh, those are immigrants, or those are illegals, or those are you just categorize people to make yourself feel better.
Yeah. We move on to Up the Tower.
On horse for me, dear sir, the marble emperor, defenestrate the king. The howling waves of people crashing through the first blockade. The gods, they washed away. They thundered up the stairwell till they reached that golden door. They knocked upon the golden door. Knock it down, 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 knock it down.
I think there's protest in the air right now. There's all sorts of notions of trying to affect change with what America has to deal with, what the world is dealing with. From my reading of the song, this is about a coup, a protest, a riot, removal of someone from power. Am I close?
Yeah, that's what it's about. And this is another one, I'm going to tell Alex he's better listen to this, because this is another one where Alex's drumming really wrote the song for me. It was
stomping. It's like a stomping rhythm.
Yeah, stomping, and then it gets kind of light. So it almost sounds like people like running up stairwells, and then like bop bop bop, knocking on a door.
Yeah,
and it just it was conceived. My general take is that landlords should not be praised. Landlords have to go out of their way to be considered a good person. It's a tough job, but landlords can be universally bad people. And the fact that we elected a landlord, to me, is just the most insane thing.
Yeah.
I would think people would be like, you know what, I don't want my landlord in charge of my life. And that's, there's good landlords, but I'm saying like it's a job, but it's very easy to be a terrible person in. So it just, I have this song where the drums sound like somebody running up a tower, and then this guy that lives in a gold tower gets elected to presidency.
Yeah,
and it was an emotional response. Just like this guy won by just inflaming people's hate.
Well, I will say there's a couple lines here that stick out for me. Defenstrate the king, knock it down, throw him out. Your statesman there, your fellow statesman, Michael Moore, has suggested that this hope for removal of office for impeachment is a false hope. What's your take on that? Is that something I think we're all hoping, I shouldn't say that, a lot of us are hoping for that to occur. Do you think it's a likely outcome?
No, I don't think it is. Especially just because I don't think that's how Americans think, and I don't think that's how things work. It's one of those things where like, oh, I don't like this guy. I'll get rid of him. He's in there like a tick. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a hopeful song it's like a fantastical song almost.
It's a fantastical song because I don't want it to call I don't want to be the guy calling for an uprising. I explained in another interview. I'm like this album is it's a coward's protest album. And because I'm not a leader of anything, but I am responding to, and it's kind of the case, I think, where people are just like, I can't believe what's happening. It's like, well, that's because we didn't really pay attention,
Yeah.
And I will put myself in that list of people that just did not pay attention.
Okay.
And just and so just the feeling of this hate that's in the place. I'm sure there's people that didn't like Obama. They wanted to get rid of Obama. And they probably felt the same way, but this feels different. It feels like uncharted territory, or maybe way too charted territory. We just don't understand it.
Yeah.
But it just just the idea of this happening is kind of. I think a lot of people are kind of. I think there's going to be a malaise or something. We'll look back and be like, oh boy, there's a lot of depression around this time.
Yeah. Okay, well, on that note, let's segue out of that.
Moving on, yeah.
There's a song here, and I believe it might be in reference to a cacti whose name I can't quite pronounce. Is it Night Blooming Serious?
Only in darkness does the flower take hold. It blooms at night. It blooms at night. It blooms at night. In a valley filled with flowers, unseen in the dark.
What it is, and I'll just give you a straight where this song came from.
Yeah.
It was after I don't know, in Oakland, California, there was the fire. The ghost ship fire.
Yes.
Where, it's a DIY space burned to the ground and hundreds of people died. And, you hear about that and you're like, oh, I know places like that. I know friends like that died. And I started realizing, especially when you tour Europe and you're playing places and you find out, or even in Canada, you find out that there's a system to support the arts, and it's embedded in the society. And then in America, we don't really have that at all. There's some grants you can get and stuff, but you can't. It's very hard to exist as an artist in America.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Yeah.
And so these places are kind of important. because it's really the only place you can go. You're living in these conditions that aren't good, and you're throwing parties for people that wouldn't be allowed in other places. Whether so these places are important because that's all we got, and to have it immediately when the fire went up, they're blaming the people for going to some place like this. And this reminded me of my youth. You couldn't go to like the rock show at the bar. You could only go to like the underground places. And that's really where you kind of learn about art, and you see a lot of bad bands and you see a lot of bad art, but you also you meet like-minded people, and it happens on the fringes. It doesn't happen. It's not government sanctioned. It's not, sanctioned by anybody. It just has to exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's kind of what, from the strategy, I was thinking like, well, these kind of places have to exist on the fringes in America. And then I was kind of thinking about other things that have to, come from the dark and not in the spotlight. And so it's just a kind of a rumination on that.
So were you countering what I was saying about it being about some sort of subversive movement?
Well, people will see like, no, it's not really. It's more about, I think it gets called subversive because it's like, oh, that's where all the freaks go. Or that's, it's just basically it's supposed to be sort of a hopeful song that these things, that these things will exist,
Yeah.
You can try to stamp them out and you can try to push them off into the edges, but that's actually where the most important things are happening. It's not in the center or, everybody's eyes are on it. It's, something does not have to be on the internet to be important.
Yeah, it's I don't want to say the power of marginalization because I think that's oppositional, but there is power in marginalization. That is where innovation and social convention kind of happens. Like that's where you meet people.
Right.
And that's how movements start, whatever the movement is. I
right.
think. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a sort of sparse musical song. I think it picks up when you start to yell, if I might use the term yell, in a valley filled with flowers unseen in the dark. That's where it really seems to blow up, as I recall.
Right.
Am I right? I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no drums till halfway through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is bizarre. And Greg doesn't really play guitar. Like he kind of hoodwinked me a bit because when we were practicing it, Greg would like play a little bit of guitar, and then halfway point when the drums start, like he'd start playing guitar. Then we recorded it. He really, the drums start halfway through. Then he doesn't really start playing guitar till the very end of the song.
Yeah.
He's just kind of do it. And so it's like, I sang this song thinking, okay, like, and then he kind of like took all the guitars out, and I'm like, what? My ass is hanging out here, man. But yeah, it was already hanging out without the drums, and now even more. So it's, but I think it works. I think it's, and it kind of, again, is like a slow build where it's just kind of, the drip, drip, drip of, you can, whatever you need to do. Like there are places that you can find that will fulfill you, and maybe you'll meet like-minded people.
Yeah. There's a lot of pensiveness on within the musical arrangements, as we've discussed. I think we're going to move on now to a song that's pretty full on. It's called Male Plague.
Every boy wants to be a cop. Male plague. I punch you down, you punch him out. Male plague.
My reading is it's about kind of bureaucratic power dynamics. That was my reading of it. It seems to be about men in charge and how that's wrecking everything. Am I close? Is that where you were coming from?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, it's just basically about masculinity and, kind of, people, men especially, when they feel like it seems like any sort of change that happens, like we take it as a personal affront, like men aren't men anymore. Why? Because women get paid or trying to get paid more.
Okay? Yeah.
Because we're trying to make a better society here. It's if you can't handle that, then maybe you're not much of a man. It's kind of my take on it.
Do you think progressive movements and change kind of remind men of older white men in particular of their mortality or something?
Yeah, and people always say, oh, by 2040 or whatever, like, white people will be a minority in America or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And some people look at that with like, oh, that's going to be bad, that's not good.
Yeah.
And then some people are like, oh, I'm sure we'll be fine,
Right.
And so I think it's when you start thinking, and I don't know if there's a connection between just a person going through life and getting to a point where they can see the end in sight, and then that's when they start getting very, very. I mean, they always say people become more and more conservative as they get older. I think it's just because you're. If it's true, it's because you're afraid.
Yeah,
basically,
you're clinging on to something. Yeah,
right.
You're clinging on to what you know, in particular, and the new stuff you don't know as well. Right,
and it's just so I can relate to some of that. I mean, I get it, and I don't understand. Sometimes like a new protest movement or something will come up, and I don't understand it.
Yeah,
but as long as I approach it where like I'll try to understand it, but really, if I try to, I think a lot of times men in general and white men particularly, because we're used to it, we're like, okay, where do I fit in this? Like,
yeah.
What do you need from me?
Yeah.
I guess I allow this. Okay, this is fine. This is good. Yeah. This all right. I don't quite understand it, but okay, that's fine. And that's kind of like the general, the feeling, and it's kind of, I don't know what to say about it, but it's well, it's fear and control, basically.
Yeah, but when you sing "Everybody Knows It's Gonna Kill You Someday," is that the stress of being a white male clinging to power? What is the thing that's going to kill you?
That one I don't quite 100% know, but I'm going to say that it's just it's almost the sense of like the disease is that because of changes and things, you become more and more toxic and more, you start getting filled with hate because of the way that the world is changing. That the things that are changing aren't going to kill you, but it's your own kind of inability to handle it that's going to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the penultimate song here, which is Corpses in Regalia.
Mm-hmm. From a high window, I spot a pale rifle. Though it was very far away, I heard his voice inside my head. You've been spending your time with corpses in regalia. You better get to stepping while you can. Charm, the way they move, the way they mouth the words. Drinking Balthazars. A decent people don't live like that. A decent folk don't live that good.
There's a lot going on here that I don't understand.
You and me both.
There seem to be there's like little scenes here that I find compelling. Can you talk about the opening passage? Because I think it sets the tone quite a bit.
Well, with this one, I always like to have a song where I don't know what's going on in it. Every album's got one or two of them on them, and so basically it was just kind of putting together stuff that evoked a mood in me. And the first part, like a nightmare that I have that's recurring is that I'll be like walking down the street and there'll be somebody in the distance and they'll be talking to me and I can hear them like they're right next to me, and that sort of auditory confusion is like fearful. And then I was reading a book, it's by Fritz Lieber, and it was originally published as A Small Brown Thing, and something similar happens. I think it's called Our Lady of Darkness, but there's a similar thing in it where like he sees somebody across the hill, and it's almost like they're communicating with him. So he's in San Francisco, so he goes up the hill, and he's looking around, and he looks back at his apartment, and the thing that he saw in the distance is now in his apartment. It's this really kind of weird, interesting thing. So that image of just like looking down at something very small that is able to whisper in your ear, to me was just, I wanted to get that in. And as far as what the corpses and regalia are, I don't quite know. I mean, I have some ideas, but I think this is one that can be open to interpretation.
Better get to stepping while you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one. That's where I'm slightly unnerved, I guess.
Yeah, that's basically just like move, get moving, because you won't get a chance to move much longer. It's basically get to moving right now.
Well, and earlier when we were talking about don't go to Anecada and sort of gentrification and maybe liberalism, there's this recurring line: decent people don't live like that. Decent folk don't live that good. And in this song, Corpses and Regalia, I assume those ideas are kind of connected.
Yeah, a little bit.
This notion of luxury recreation in the face of.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely what kind of ties it all in. It's just this, and that line, decent people don't live like that. Decent folk don't live that good. I got it from an old movie, and I wish I could remember what it was. It was one of those nights where I just wrote it down, like somebody was like complaining, and I wanted it to be sort of vague, where it's like, there isn't a certain way decent people should live. People can live however they want, but the idea that because you're being so ridiculously extravagant, you're angering people. Yeah. And you're shoving it in their faces, and they don't like it. It's offensive. Yeah. There's ways to live your life, and maybe I think maybe it's one of the weirder outcomes of the internet is that we are now just like presenting ourselves to this void. Like here's me. Here's what I ate. Here's this new car I got. Here's and so that it's a weird sort of communication. Yeah. You're basically saying, here's what I like and here's what I have. It's bizarre, and I think it's affecting people in ways that I don't quite understand.
This is a more synthesized song, I think. It's almost a danceable song.
Yeah, and this is one where Scott, we definitely wanted Scott's bass to be louder on this record, and this is the one where it just it gets so crazy. Like his bass playing on this one is like, okay, this is pretty awesome. So respect to Scott on this one.
All right, we move on to the final song on Relatives in Descent. It's called Half Sister. It also begins with dialogue, I suppose, much the same way the last song kind of does.
In ancient Palestine, a Roman middle manager, dresses down a radical. I have a backlog of so-called prophets. You are a multitude. The offender said, I witness truth. Perplexed and filled with it, the killer replied, truth. What is
it? This is where I kind of lay out, I think, what, after all these songs that were kind of about distortion or not getting the truth or living in the darkness and all this stuff. Now there's 3 stories that are how truth is perceived in a sense. And the first one is, just the story like Jesus and Pontius Pilate, which is another interesting story because people have ideas about Pontius Pilate, and a lot of it's affected by, the way that he's presented in the Bible, which might have been a way just to say the Romans weren't so bad, that's why, because they're trying to sell it to Romans. Yeah. He might have actually been an asshole, but a lot of times he's presented as this thinker, And truth, what is it, is something that he says. And growing up in the church I lived next to, the old Italian guy would have priest would do mosaics, and he did the mosaic of the Passion of the Christ on the wall. And truth, what is it, is at the very beginning. And so he talks about and so that always kind of stuck out at me, truth, what is it, Yeah. And so, the idea, just that story freighted with all the knowledge, the fact that I just called Jesus a prisoner, and but he's babbling, he's not making any sense.
Yeah.
That's like, it was just another day in Palestine, but since then that story has obviously affected a lot of people in different ways, and so it's like, what is the truth of that situation?
Right.
Then the second one is in Darlington, in England, and that's only because our friend Stu, who would drive us around on European tours, is from Darlington, and we always joke that he's like, oh, that's the real D-town. You guys are from Detroit. That's not D-town. Darlington's D-town. So I was like, okay, I'll put it in, and that's just about the idea of a living ghost that appears in someone's backyard, and just the idea that it's not really a ghost. It's more about like unspoken or things, family histories that have not been spoken of, and because it's affecting. He's like bringing in scientists to try to figure out what this ghost is, and at the end of the day, it's just a relative that's still alive, thousands of miles away, like thinking very badly of him, very poorly of him.
A half sister, in fact.
A half sister,
right?
And then the third one is just in northern Michigan because it's a fascinating place, and just the idea, like I wanted to, for the longest time, I had a title I wanted to call a song "A Talkative Horse," and I don't know why, but I wanted to. And then
Mr. Ed fan? Are you a big Mr. Ed fan? Is that?
Yeah, well, I when I was a kid, I used to go to summer camp. I would ride horses. I've always really liked horses, but just thinking about the idea of like, we like to think that if animals could talk, it'd be like, oh, I love you, or give me, But I was just thinking, like, if they could talk, and they're just like this, if they told us that humanity was terrible, it's kind of like shoot the messenger, kill the Messiah. Like if this guy says, if talking horse says, hey,
interesting,
you need to clean up your act. The way that we'd probably handle it is we'd probably shoot him and stuff him, and then make up a story about him, like, kids, come look at this is the horse that could talk, and his message was always do your best.
Right. You crucify the horse.
Yeah. So I put some more Jesus stuff on the horse than actually Jesus.
Right.
He's been talked about enough, that guy. It's the horse. But it's just the idea of these three stories. And I had a lot more stories, but I was like, okay, that's probably enough.
Well, and the fundamental moral about it, I guess, is, or rather, the you sort of conclude the song with this notion of what truth might be. I think in an age of fake news and whatnot.
Right, and it's something that it's not ever going to be presented to you that way. You kind of have to pick up on it. To Pontius Pilate in the first story, Jesus was just this another guy. But maybe, because if we're going to believe the story, if you actually listened to him, maybe things would be different. And, this kind of family strife that, if you actually look for the truth and things, your life would be a lot better. You wouldn't have like these ghosts haunting you, if you were more upfront with the truth. And the idea of like, it's out there. There is a truth. I don't know what it is, but it does exist, and there is some shared realities that we can all agree on if we actually kind of work at it.
Yeah,
in a sense.
Well, we began the record talking about private understanding and this notion, this lyric rather, she is trying to reach you. And here it is again, a version of the same idea. She is trying to reach you.
She's trying to reach you, trying to reach you. She's trying to reach you, trying to reach you.
I just wanted to kind of reiterate that message that whatever it is, or whatever she is, it's out there, because it was an honest response to going through this year, and being really bummed out, and then to have 3 previous albums that are kind of dark and foreboding, or warning about things coming. I didn't want the album to be cheery or uplifting. It didn't seem right, especially for a band like us.
Right.
But I also didn't want to just give in completely to despair, and so it's and that's always kind of the thing, is that you want to make sure that there is the idea that in the despairing, hopeless moments there is there is still there is a light that we can focus on.
Yeah.
And whatever that is, I don't know. I'm not going to give you the answer because I don't know the answer, but there's something there.
Well, for what it's worth, Joe, I think Relatives in Descent is a really powerful record, and it's haunting all across the board. This song is no different, and I thank you for this. I thank you for spending time with me to talk about the songs. Was this... I've been asking people this because I don't know. We spend a lot of time together here talking about your record. Is this useful for you? Did you learn something? Have you talked about this record in this way with anyone else?
It always is, because and that's why I think in like the press release stuff, I was like, this is not a concept album because I did not set out, the band did not set out to make this record. It kind of happened.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you try to parse the words. Like why was I watching an old movie and, decent people don't live that good, or live that well. Like why did that stick out to me? And why did I feel like I needed to jam it into a song?
Yeah.
And talking about it, you kind of figure like, oh yeah, obviously I'm very concerned and I'm trying to be cheerful in the face of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like I say, I appreciate this, and I want to know what's coming up next for you and your band. I presume touring is on the horizon. Are you also working towards more songs, new songs?
Well, yeah, it's going to be a lot of touring. We're definitely going to be hitting Canada hopefully next year. Hopefully more than we have in the past. We actually play some places we haven't played. That's one of the things that keeps us going is like, okay, we're going to play places we haven't played or go back to places that we liked.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the what keeps the band firing. We did record some songs that didn't make the album, that are kind of, we recorded some down with Mike Montgomery and Kelly Deal from Our Ring. Mm-hmm. And we recorded a couple songs with Matthew Deere, who's a local fella. So we have like enough for like an EP that hopefully will come out at some point.
Oh, okay.
And then, then it's going to be touring, and then definitely not next year, but hopefully the year after that we'll start the process again.
Right.
And maybe that will be the one where I'm just like, sunny days are here again, and let's sing about love. I would love to sing love songs because I'm realizing now that's where the money is.
It might be the case. You might be right about that. You're on a new record label, Domino Records, which is great. Good for you. Is there a central place we can send people to learn more about Protomartyr and this record in terms of the internet? Can you think of a place that I can't think of right now?
we have a website that I don't know how good it is, but we have one. It's called protomartyrband.com. Mm-hmm. I'm sure the label has information on us.
Yeah.
Don't trust Wikipedia. Fake news. Be careful what you read out there.
Yeah.
It might not all be true.
Okay. Protomartyrband.com for the realist factual facts.
Yeah, there's absolutely no facts there except the tour dates.
Right.
So
well, that's facts. That's information. Yeah. Is there a single song from Relatives in Descent that we can send people off with right now that you would choose for us?
I would choose the Chuckler right now. That right now is my my go-to. It changes all the time, but I think the Chuckler is a pretty good encapsulation of, if you like the Chuckler, you'll like the rest of the album.
All right, this is the Chuckler by Protomartyr. Joe, thank you so much again for your time today, and best of luck with everything going forward.
Yeah, talk to you again soon.
And there are lots of living, and matters less to me now. And any pleasure to ride, knowing that they'd never feel as good as a bench pit on a thrift store coat. The smell of the sauerkraut and clothes. An angry customer's face, confused cause they didn't get the way. chuckling. Till there's no more breath in my lungs. And it really doesn't matter at all.
That was the 357th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Anecada podcast network and is available on iTunes, Audioboom, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Overcast, among many other podcast platforms. If you can't find an episode you're looking for, or you wish to learn more about me, or sign up for the newsletter for the show, please visit vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at VishCreative, or follow me at Vishkhanna. You can also listen to a radio show version of Creative Control on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time, around the world at CFRU.ca, or on an actual radio at 93.3 FM if you're in or near Guelph. Visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going and view some t-shirts that I can offer you as gifts if you decide to pledge. This episode would not be possible without our sponsors, Pizza Trocadero, whom you can call for pickup or delivery at 519-829-2444 in Guelph, or check them out at trocaderoguelph.ca. The Bookshelf, an independently owned bookstore, bar, music venue, and movie theater located at 41 Quebec Street in Guelph. Learn more about them at bookshelf.ca. Planet Bean, freshly roasted, fair trade certified organic coffee. PlanetBeanCoffee.com for more info. Granddad's Donuts, located at 574 James Street North in Hamilton, Ontario. Amazing, old-fashioned, giant donuts. Visit granddads.ca to learn more about them. To have a whole meal's worth of ingredients delivered right to your Canadian home, visit hellofresh.ca and use the promo code CREATIVE50 for 50% off your first order. That's creative with a K. 50, all one thing. It's not a word exactly because it's a number, but creative50, all one thing, no spaces, creative with a K, and you'll get 50% off your first order from HelloFresh. And speaking of fresh, FreshBooks, a cloud accounting software for small business owners. Try it free for 30 days. Go to freshbooks.com/Creative Control, and in their How Did You Hear About Us section, enter Creative Control, one word. That's creative with a K and control with a K, all one word, and you will get to try FreshBooks for 30 days. No money down. That's it for another episode. Thanks to Joe Casey and the people of Protomartyr and all of you for listening. I enjoyed that very much. It's great to speak with Joe again. He's a very thoughtful guy, and that band is amazing, and this record's fantastic. I hope you learn things about it and feel compelled to grab that record, because it's great. All right, that's all I have to say for now. I will talk to you very, very soon. Please subscribe to the show, download episodes of the show, tell your friends about the show, and that'll keep the thing going, really, is what it'll do. So thank you. Thank you very much. All right, I'll talk to you later. Goodbye for now.